Hello, this is Nick Rijmakers from Adobe, here to talk to you about the HTTP cache module from ACS AEM Commons, specifically diving into on how to create your own custom HTTP cache config extension or cache key factory. Usually that's in the same component serving two services. So this really goes into, well, how to hook in the HTTP cache with your own business logic or your own specific requirements that may not be in the ACS Commons module by itself. So luckily ACS Commons provided an easy way to extend this, and then I will show that to you. So first of all, just picking up where we left off on our example. So we created this component with a thread sleep of 5 seconds, which should only occur when the content selector of that component is loaded in. And then it will display this Doom guy image. And when this is not the case with the content selector, but the default selector, it should not. But the problem we had, as discussed previously, that it does, because the out-of-the-box extension, the resource type extension, does not take this into account. It only checks for the content path and the resource type, and if that's a match, then it will cache and serve the content regardless of the selector, and it does not differentiate. So as you can see here, we have our cache entry, and if we would clear the cache here, and then load in over here, it displays as intended, which was don't display anything, which refers to the default selector here over here. But then it's cached, and then we don't show anything else. So now here we get don't display anything, where it should show the Doom guy. So if I would clear the cache again, and now we should have a delay of 5 seconds. And here you go, and then now it's proper here, but now we have the problem that here it's improper because, yeah, we don't take selectors into account. So let's solve this. So first of all, I would like to talk a little bit about the services, just to give you a rough idea. So actually the first thing what I would do if I have to create my own HTTP cache config extension key factory, I go to ACS AEM Commons and copy this stuff over. And then go from there. I would choose the extension that resembles most what I need and go from there if possible. And yeah, if need be, I'll start from scratch. But in our case, we already have the resource type HTTP cache config extension, and we do need the path and the resource types differentiation. So we will go from here. So I will copy these into our project and change them. But first of all, I would just like to talk to you about what it actually does. So first step in the flow of this extension is basically checking if the request is eligible for caching. So, the base config does very basic stuff like request URI, and, well, actually I can show it here in our, see, where is it? Yeah, it does request URI here. It does IAM authentication. It checks for, it specifies on which include or request in the filter scope if it's one or the other. You cannot choose both. And it specifies an order of evaluation. Of course, this is important, but it's very basic. And in all cases, you need more than this, because if you go and cache everything under specific URI, then that's not good. So this is step 1, and then step 2 is most certainly always you then specify a cache key factory. And the cache key factory actually, well, specifies how keys are created in the cache. And the cache key, or sorry, cache config extension determines whether the cache engine should actually proceed to cache the request, include or request by itself. So just going back to the ACS Commons project, let's just start with the basics. So the very simplest thing is really to just determine whether the request, include request in this case, should be cached or not. You get 2 parameters. You get the sling request, which is uncached. You know, this is really fresh request. And you get the HTTP cache config, the base config basically. So that's what I just seen you shown to you in the XML file. And then we have to determine, okay, will we proceed caching? Yes or no? And in this case, for the resource type cache config extension, it's a factory. We said like, okay, well, in our case, let's take a look. We said, okay, these are the paths allowed, and these are the resource types. So these are stored into the instance of this Java object. So these are stored right here. Here they're stored as patterns. We parse them over on the activate, but here they are, resource type and path patterns. So what we will do, we will match these against the request as resource, and then actually check, oh, is this request, this include request, valid for caching? And if not, we return false, and basically everything stops. Well, everything stops. I mean, there might be some more caching configs over that will also perform this, but if they all return false, then there's no caching on HTTP cache. So it will look. So here, basically, again, here, this is for the paths, to the resource paths, match what we specified, the regex. And for here, for the resource types, we do the same thing. Is it a match? And if it's a match, then we return true. And then, okay, if we return true, then the HTTP cache will proceed. And it will capture the response in the filter chain. And then build a cache key. Maybe it's best if I would show you HTTP cache filter. So this filter over here from the HTTP cache is really the heart, I think, well, it really captures well the flow of the HTTP cache. So what happens is that first we check if there's a configuration that matches the filter scope and the request URI and all that stuff. So the base config. And then we perform some, common stuff like, is the request cacheable? So this evaluates if, one of those global rules are not hit, like, oh, the response is, or there are query parameters in the request. Okay, we should not cache if that's specified. By default it isn't, but if so, then we won't proceed. And then we proceed like, okay, is there a cache hit? Is it already inside the, cache in one of the stores? Or the store specified, I'm sorry. Then we will just deliver the cache content over here and we will stop the filter chain. If it is a request, cacheable request, but there's no, it's not in the cache itself yet, then we mark it as cacheable. And then we wrap the response, continue the filter. So the response will be written to the wrapper. And then we will actually cache it with the wrapped response. So here we will write the response into a temporary memsync and then store it in the designated store of the cache config. So this really captures the whole flow. So if you have problems with HTTP cache and all the bundles and components are running, but still it's not actually working, I would recommend you to check out ACS AEM Commons to your local instance, put it in your Eclipse or IntelliJ, and start debugging over here in this class. Abstract HTTP cache filter. It's located under HTTP cache filter IMPL, and both the include and the request extend this class and, well, delegate their logic to the abstract filter. And over here you can really see what's going on. So you should be quickly finding out what's wrong if you debug over here. So back to our resource type config extension. So again, assuming that in a specific Sling filter context in the include chain, we are, well, accepting. So we say, okay, here we will cache. So we are under a resource with a path that is under content layout WCM and has a resource type of expensive component. Okay, then we go proceed to cache. And now we need to build a cache key. So the cache key is purely for the HTTP cache engine and the stores to actually differentiate its entries to, yeah, it's just like basically like a hash map. You could see it like that in a basic sense. And this implements a cache key from HTTP cache and serializable if you want to support the JCR storage. And basically it just stores in the data. So not the response, but just the metadata you need to differentiate entries. And then you have your equals and hash code methods. And these are important because, of course, the equals, yeah, I don't have to state the obvious, but yeah, this determines whether the HTTP cache regards an entry as new or not and whether it hits or not, so this is important. ToString is also important because this is the value we'll see in your JMX. So this right here comes from the ToString, and this also needs to, this needs to be fairly readable and also different because this is also used for the invalidate method in the HTTP cache engine. So yeah, it's quite important you write a ToString method that is different per each cache type entry, but readable for administration purposes. Write and read object, this is for the serialization for the JCR storage. Or maybe disk storage even later, but for now that's not the case. We don't support it yet. If you want to write it, that would be awesome. So I've gone through basically the cache key. So the thing is, if you would say, all right, I need to create cache entries based on each user group from my middleware, then you would have to store that user group in your own cache key, and it would be a field in here. And of course, you would have to include it in the equals method as well. So then in that way, you can then serve different cache entries based on a user group from your middleware. So you would have to put it in here. And you will also have to write logic in here in the extension to actually extract the user group, that's stored in your middleware from the request, and then to construct the cache key with the proper user group. So that's in a nutshell, basically, the cache, HTTP cache config extension and cache key factory. And one more thing, you are not limited to, of course, create it in one class. You could create it in two classes, two components with each its own service, but we follow here the convention to just put it in one. It's a bit easier. Okay, so now back to our concrete problem. So again, we need a cache logic that differentiates based on selectors. So what I will do is just copy over the cache config extension, because I want to have something that resembles this but with a little bit extra, namely the selector. So I will copy this and I will start creating my own cache key extension. Okay, so how shall we name this? My custom resource config extension. Doesn't really matter. All right. Okay. Then I'm going to obviously rename everything here. Resource config extension. All right. Rename the package. Yeah. Okay. Let's see if I forgot anything here. Yep. Okay, so I copied over the config extension from out of the box and created my own. I now need to obviously have my own key. So let's copy that one over as well. Copy the key over. And I'll create the key here. Let's see, my custom resource cache key. All right, change the package name. Let's see, rename class. Okay, so this, yeah, the exact same. Of course, need to change this here, my custom cache key. Let's take a look. All right, this seems to look okay. There are no errors. Okay, let's see, maybe cache resource config extension. Okay, did I forget anything? I don't think so. Looks pretty okay. All right, so what I'm gonna do now, so I basically copied over the ACS AEM Commons stuff, and I just want to make sure that I didn't miss anything. So to validate that everything is still working as intended, I'm going to copy the reference of our extension, and I'm going to wire this into our configurations. So currently, of course, we reference the out-of-the-box stuff, and I will need to replace this with the stuff we just created. Should be the exact equal, but I want to make sure this is indeed the case. Okay, we have here our factory configuration referring to the old one, and here will be the new one. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to install this to my author instance and take a look. So make sure the cache is flushed. Okay. And I'm gonna IntelliVault this over. Okay, well, let's take a look if everything still works. Okay, that seemed to work. Yes. All right, that seems to work, and this should of course have the same exact issue. It does. Okay, so I copied everything over and everything seems to work still, or at least it didn't get worse. So let's then proceed to actually writing the stuff that we need to write. So I will go to, let's see, the extension. All right. Okay, so the first thing the first place where I start is, of course, we need to buy OSG iConfig specify which selectors we want to cache, or allow through. So that will be a array. Let's make it extensible. We say HTTP cache config extension selectors allowed. All right, by default empty, and I'm going to say allowed sling selectors. Okay. Then, of course, I will need to store it into the actual Java object. So, oops, my key is a bit broken. String selectors at this field. And then, of course, need to make sure this is wired from the activate method. So, selectors is config selectors allowed. Okay. All right. This should be, well, we can immediately just put it here just to make it easier. So we put it in our configuration. Selectors allowed is, and it is content. All right. This should translate into, well, this config at least holding these values. Now we need to do something with it, obviously. So I'm going to write something over here. Let's just say the resource type is a bit more expensive, so I'm gonna just write over here. Okay, if we specified any selectors at all, because if not, we will cache everything. But if selectors dot length greater than 0, then, well, let's just do it like this. Selector matched is false. Start with the assumption we didn't match anything, and and if we didn't match anything, then we return a false, and if not, if we did have a match, then proceed with the other stuff. We cannot just return true here, because then we won't perform this checks over here. So only if this false, then don't proceed. Okay, then we need to loop all selectors. Selector in selectors. Let's take a look at what we specified. Okay. Did I make a mistake? Oh, for loop, of course. Okay. Okay, first I need the present selectors, the ones that are present in the request. Equals request.request path info, I believe. Yes, path info, get selectors. Yeah. And then if array utils contains present selectors selector, then we have a match, then everything's fine. Let's see, make a static import. So maybe clean this up a bit. All right, so okay. So this should at least yeah, do the proper checking for the selectors. Okay. Now I would also like to extend the cache key factory and the cache key. So let's take a look at that. I think I pass in the sling servlet request here. So what I can do is just go over here and then say, okay. Okay, so now we're going to add the field, the custom stuff that we don't have. Final string selector string. I'm just going to use the complete selector string in the request. It's easier. So I will just say, well, request path info. Path info is request. Well, actually, no, let's just do it easier. Selector string is request path info get selector string there. And if we don't have the request, and this is used for comparison purposes, whether to check if a config could be created by this extension, then we just say string utils dot empty for the selector string. Okay. Now we need to obviously add this selector string to the equals method because we actually factor this in. So in this case, I'm gonna make it is very easy. So let's see. Oh, let's see that get resource pass. We will still need a getter for the selector first, I believe. So we can actually oops, sorry. So, there, getter selector string. Okay. Well, don't necessarily need it, but it's a bit cleaner. So okay, get selector string for this, and then the other object get selector string. Okay, so this factors this in the equals and all the logic that the HTTP cache basically needs to differentiate entries. Hash code, I'm not going to add it because this is plentiful for a hash code. It would only make it less performant, I think, if we had the selectors over here. For toString, that would be probably nice to have. It would be nice to have the selector string represented in a toString method. So I'm going to add it here as well, so we can see it in our JMX console. This should add the selector string over here, so it's better readable. Okay. I think this is everything. Oh, also just as demonstration for the JCR cache. Let's see how this went. Right, so we have this write and read object. So I'm just gonna, yeah, this here as well, just to be good. So here I'm gonna add selector string to the right, and then it also has the before here. Selector string is read. How does it? I just seem to forget these things, so I just need to look them up. Read object string. Okay. All right. Oh, okay. No, I cannot make it final. All right. Okay, so this also supports the JCR cache. I think I included everything, so I'm gonna try this out. First of all, install the bundle. Okay, success. Now push the config values. All right, so let's take a look. Moment of truth. Clear the cache. See if I did anything wrong. It's gonna haunt me. All right. Aha. So as you can see now, or am I think I'm a bit cheering too early. I think so, because it's never caching at all now. It's not creating any entries, is it? I'll have to check this out, because it should load a lot faster, and it's definitely not. So let's take a look. Let's take a look at the components. All right. Let's take a look. Okay, they are at least active. That's good. And then my custom resource extension. All right, selectors allowed content, which is good. So that seems to be proper, but for some reason there are some errors. So let's take a look first. First, I'm just going to look at the extension itself, if everything comes through properly. So I'm going to hook my debugger in. And refresh. Okay, wait, this is maybe not the smartest. I think I should put it here, because otherwise it will go through every single request. Let's see. Let's see if okay, let's see if this ever hits. That what might be a smart move. Okay, yes, now it goes to everything that of course has content. That's obviously maybe not good. Let's see. So now it really gets tricky to debug this stuff. So let's take a look. Okay, here it never hits, it seems. Okay, so I need to go to the resource that we wish to cache. I believe it was in over here. Okay, so this is the path, and I'm going to just enter that over here. So if request.getResource.getPath equals, then I want to debug. We can figure out what's wrong, hopefully. Okay, so we hit it. Let's take a look where it goes wrong. So we have our selectors content. We have our present selectors, which is content. Selector match true, okay. Oh, I think I made a mistake here, yes. If selector matched true. So that's sloppy. Okay. If not selector matched true, of course. Yeah. But something little like this can snap it up, of course. So let's take a look if I correct this. Clear cache. Okay, so I built. Let's take a look if this makes any. Okay. That's taking a while, but okay, fine. I'm not debugging, am I? No. Okay. All right. See if the second time. Okay, now it goes faster. So let's see what it created over here. Ah, I forgot the dot here, but it does contain the selector. Okay, and if correct, this should still work. It does. It's now compatible with both renditions and only caches the rendition that has a thread sleep of 5 seconds. Let's see, I should make this a bit more pretty, I guess. Let's see, I can make this even a bit more pretty by going to my cache key, going to the toString. You know, I can even make it even more pretty by saying I'm going to add the extension. So let's just add the extension over here. It's a request path info extension. And here the extension, let's just make it just for demonstration purposes here, .html. o.writeObject extension. And extension is string o.readObject, and then we can put the extension after the selector. That would be nice. Extension. Okay. All right. Let's see. Alright, so let's take a look what comes out now. This is patient again. Okay. So as you can see here, we now have the resource path with the selector, with the extension, with the authentication requirement. And of course you could put, in your custom case, you could put the user group of your middleware, whatever, in brackets here. So it's really clear. And then you can just say, okay, show me the entry over here. And there you go. So now I've shown you basically how to extend the cache config extension, how to create your own, and to create your own key factory and leverage that to meet your own specific requirements. So that's it for now, and hope you have a great day.